3. I had no clue what was going to come out of my mouth after I said that. Nothing. This is amazing content. We should totally put this out.
You're listening to Widowed AF with Rosie Gilmoss and Lucinda Boast.
We've invited some members of the world's most exclusive club to bravely share their stories.
Join us for some honest conversations about living a different life, the crushing lows, the surprising highs, and everything in between.
Please note this is a podcast about death. Carefully read the episode descriptions and be kind to yourself.
But for now, welcome to our podcast.
Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host today, Rosie Gilmoss, and joining me is Jonathan Gilmoss. Welcome back to the podcast, John.
Hi, Rose. Hi, everybody.
So today we're going to have a little bit of a reflect on Sasha's episode. For anybody that missed it, Sasha's episode was out on Monday, and it is a very moving episode, as they all are. This one feels particularly, I don't know, there's a lot of love, isn't there? You chose the name of the episode, didn't you?
Yeah, because so I didn't listen to when you did the actual interview. I just waited for the edit to do the editing afterwards. And I finished the episode. I was like, oh my God, this woman adores this man. This is, both a shame, but also so nice to see someone feeling that way.
Yeah, so we called it Loved AF, and the song that Sasha and I chose between us for her little video montage was Lucky Man by The Verve. We chose that because he was a big Britpop fan, and we also felt that it felt a little bit peculiar to play Lucky Man over video of photos of a man who died. But I do think that to be loved like he was by his family and by Sasha, that is lucky, isn't it?
Yeah, that was something special. And that definitely came across.
And the face tingles all come in really, because I just keep thinking about how little time they got, and it's never enough, is it? It's never enough.
No.
But I take a lot of comfort from the fact that I had 14 years with Ben, and you were with Sarah even longer, weren't you?
Yeah, we were 1 month shy of 21 years.
21 years, goodness me, that's a long time to spend. It's a lifetime with somebody, isn't it? And whilst that doesn't make the parting any easier, my God, it doesn't. But you can look back now, not in the early days. If somebody had said to me, oh, you had 14 good years, I probably would have, I don't know, I say I'm going to hit them, I don't hit, but I'd have cried or run away. So I think it very much depends on where you are in your journey as to how receptive you are to that sort of thing. So I do apologise if I have upset anybody by saying that. I don't in any way mean to diminish anybody's grief, because the longer you spend with them, the more you miss them, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I found the way she spoke about him, I found it quite magical. And I'm really glad that we got to commit that to tape, as it were, and that's out there. And I spoke to her briefly this morning just to see how she was doing, and her in-laws haven't listened yet, but they're planning to at the weekend. So I will check in with her and see how they received it. But saying that, I don't see that they could have a problem with it. She spoke about him so honourably and beautifully. I think if that was my son, I'd be delighted to hear someone speak about them like that.
I think I'll probably turn up on the door and give her a big hug.
I bet they will, actually. They're very fond of her, aren't they?
Yeah.
Now, one of the topics to come out of this episode, and it's something that we have heard talked about a little bit within our community, and it's this idea that when somebody has a terminal diagnosis, that you are often given the words or told the words, you need to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Anybody who's heard those words knows the weight that they carry. I've only heard those words once, and that was when you were in hospital. I didn't obviously have those words attached to Ben's death, which was sudden. So you, within this duo podcast, you have the kind of unique experience on this. And I believe that for many people, the grieving process starts then. Are you able to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. So I'll give a little bit of context. Don't worry, I won't go into too much detail, which I do have a tendency to do sometimes. But
you give as much detail as you like, darling.
So it was probably around the August time, and I think it was the first time Sarah had come down with sepsis, and I was a little bit confused, and I asked to go see the consultants, and I signed in office, and he's like, "You ask me anything you want," and I quite promptly looked him straight in the eye, and I went, "Can you tell me what the fuck is going on?" And that's when he said these words to me, well, you have to prepare for the worst whilst hoping for the best. And then I didn't know what that meant But I knew that we were obviously in a serious situation. It wasn't until I was going through my grief counselling, and my counsellor said, look, this is probably the moment you start to grieve. It's because not grieving someone while they're alive is so impossible, because the concept of grief is a massive shock to your life. A change to your life is the technical definition for grief. So when you get told this, prepare for the worst, like your mind will instantly start to think about, oh my God, I've got to think about a life without this person in it anymore. And that's the very beginning. But of course, you're wrapped up in caring, and and the roller coaster ride it is until they do pass away, or sometimes get better.
And also, you very sorry, John, I've just interrupted you again. Poor guy doesn't get a word in edgeways, does he? Of course, this idea that when somebody gets a terminal diagnosis, or is diagnosed with a very debilitating illness or disease or condition, you switch from being their lover, their partner, their husband, their wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you may be to them, into being their carer and their advocate, and you have to fight for them, and you have to help them to the toilet, you have to help them dress, you have to do many, many things that you didn't anticipate doing as when you entered into the relationship. And for many people, this actually brings them very close, doesn't it? And it creates this kind of unique and very intense bond, which I guess in many ways even makes the parting more cruel at the end.
Somehow I got the vision from both sides. There's one caring for Sarah, and then the other one that is being cared for by you when I came out from COVID, because my body didn't work. I was helpless. So I got a fraction of an insight into having to give over your care 100% to the person that you love when you don't want to be the burden. It's difficult on both sides. And then of course, the outcome I had with Sarah was, she died. So my resolution wasn't coming back to seeing them come back to health. So it's more of a different sort of separation, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does, and it's also complicated, isn't it? This is the thing. I genuinely think that people who haven't lived through an enormous trauma or loss like this are they won't have any clue about the build-up and the way in which the dynamic of your relationship changes, the way you change, and the way that you have to begin this grieving process. Because I know I felt personally, in the only way I can relate, that hope for me was very dangerous when Ben died, because obviously with him not being found, I could have spent the rest of my life clinging on to this kind of glimmer of hope. I'm quite a practical person. The circumstances of his death left no doubt. And I remember saying the words, it'll be the hope that will kill me. I can't hope. And I can see that, when talking to people who've lost people through cancer and other terminal illnesses, is that the hope disappears at the end. And that's normally when they make the decision to go, isn't it?
Well, funnily enough, I remember those last 2 weeks from when we got the game over conversation, as I call it. I was going through a process of acceptance, but also I didn't want to believe the medical profession. So there was a tiny, tiny, tiny little glimmer that I thought, if I let go of this, she's lost. But she'd lost it. And she'd lost anyway.
And we talk about the bargaining, don't we? The bargaining, and with the police knock at the door, that sort of thing. Well, it must be this, it must be this. And I imagine with this sort of situation, there's that kind of, they could be wrong.
Yeah.
What if they're wrong?
Yeah, that was.
What if this person is the miracle?
Yeah, that was there. And then you've got the other side of it, which I don't really speak of much, because it's not a real feeling, which is, how long is she going to be like this before it lets her go? Because there's a certain point when you look at them and you're like, this is cruel now. Like, they have left, but they're still there, and no one wants to let them go. You don't want to go away, but you have to let go, and you go in this circle of shame and drama and hope, and then back to shame for thinking about, like, just let them go, and then what's wrong. And you get through all these feelings right up until the point they take their last breath. And then you then swap out of that into the husband or the wife that's just lost their time.
I don't think I've actually heard you talk about that. That was quite moving. I could feel my bloody face tingle.
But if I'm honest, it's only recently that I've been able to sort of vocalise the feeling, because he was wrapped in shame. But there is
Yeah.
no shame. You're looking at the person you love suffering, and the only way out for them is for this to be over. And it's the hard choice. But I'm not alone in it. I'm pretty sure that many other cancer widows will relate to this. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you're wishing them dead. You're just wishing them not to suffer anymore.
That's really powerful. I'm really glad that you've said that, actually, because I think there'll be a lot of people out there that will really need to hear that. And this is kind of what we want to do in this space, as it were, is talk about the slightly uncomfortable things, because they're very, very common themes that run through grief. And this feeling of almost, and I really don't like to use the word relief, because it's not a relief, is it? But it's I suppose it's they're no longer in pain, they're no longer suffering, and as you said yourself, who wants to see the person they love suffer?
Mm.
That's
unbearable.
If
they can't get well again, then at least give them dignity. Well, that's the only thing that I ask, and that's where these conflicting feelings come from.
Yeah, that also is very powerful, Jon. Thank you. I'm going to just bring us back round again to his last meal, because I thought how wonderful. He wanted a Five Guys, and that was, that's what he had. And the fact that he was such a super clean living guy as well, and that he just wanted to end with a Five Guys.
But it also shows to their relationship, although quite a relatively young relationship, he'd already communicated when I asked for a Five Guys, like, I'm done, darling, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they both understood it, and they both knew exactly what that meant. But then went and did it anyway. I think that sort of communication and relationship is priceless.
Yeah, it's it just makes it all the more cruel that they didn't get longer together. But as we are learning ourselves, there is no rhyme or reason for this. It seems to just be complete luck of the draw of who's affected, and it doesn't matter how good you are and how much you love your person. If death comes knocking, there's nothing we can do, is there? So accepting that it happens, horrible things happen to good people, is also very much part of this process.
Yeah.
Because I know, why me? It feels kind of narcissistic, I guess, to say it, but it was like, why me? Why me? Why my husband? But why any of us, right?
Yeah, but also a valid feeling. You feel like the world's coming against you, and it's like, well, what have I done wrong? Like,
and that's, I think, what sort of pushes that I want to burn the world mentality.
Yeah.
Fuck you, fuck everybody, and that's when our behaviour gets a bit
erratic. We'll say erratic.
Erratic. That's the perfect word for it. And actually, I mean, I've been under the weather this week. I have not had a serious illness, I hasten to add, and I would not like to take away from anybody that does. But I had COVID. Having talked about it on air, I then went down with my first sort of confirmed bout of COVID, and I tell you what, it's not pleasant, is it? I mean, I know, obviously, you know that, but yeah, it threw me back in a way to how things were when I was on my own, and if I got sick at all. And obviously I have you, and you're, wonderful, and we share the childcare, and, everything can be managed. It's not easy managing 4 kids on your own, but we can do it for a short period of time, right? And it just made my heart go out to those members of our tribe that are doing this on their own. And I mean, solo parenting. So solo parenting is relentless, and it is exhausting. And just not having anybody there to bring you a cup of tea when you're poorly feels like such a small thing, but it's such an enormous thing. And particularly if you are doing this journey with children, because even when you're sick, you still got to get up and get them clean and fed and off to school. And many of us have got parents or friends and extended family that will help, but there are many of us on our own. And it just, I don't know, I just wanted to kind of express compassion to anybody that is doing it on their own out there, because it is difficult. It is. And nothing I say will take that away. But I just wanted to express a little bit of, I don't know, just give you a little well done, I suppose, if that doesn't sound too patronising.
Yeah, and not just for coping while you're ill. Like your mum, your dad, you're the disciplinarian, the best friend, the good cop, bad cop, the lot, everything. It's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, and there's nobody even just say, oh, would you just put them to bed tonight? I just can't face it. And that's it. Oh, and I mean, let's not even dwell on that. wanting to share all the celebrations as well as the bad bits, but maybe that's for another episode, do you think? But the other thing I wanted to touch on as well is when you're physically ill, and I think particularly COVID here, I think this does tend to have quite a strong impact on our mental health. And you can get quite low and start to feel quite isolated. And I was sort of just made a list really, because all the things that I preach, that are super, super important for getting yourself through this or getting yourself through the worst of it. And you can't do them when you're sick. So you can't really exercise. You don't really fancy eating all the fruit and veg. You don't sleep very well. You can't leave the house, so no fresh air. And then you feel guilty because you're not doing things. And then you feel guilty for feeling guilty. And then your mood goes. So all of this stems off a physical illness. The impact it can then have on your sort of mental well-being as well is I guess because I'm very, very lucky with my health. I don't suffer ill health very often. So it really knocks me when I do. It's things that you take for granted, isn't it, that you can't do when you're sick. And we know how important these things are in getting better.
And if you've built yourself like the routine, especially a solo parent routine, and then you get ill, your routine goes to whack, and we've all been there. It's horrible.
Oh, and it's almost like being ill kind of threatens the tightrope that you've managed to create for yourself, and you've got yourself balanced on that tightrope. And something like even a cold, it's just something that makes you feel crap, and suddenly your balance is off, and everything just feels that bit harder.
Yeah.
So in a bout of very rare creativity, I decided to try and make a graphic, like a visual of what I sort of call in my head the pillars of healing. And they're not really pillars, that's just how my brain likes to picture them. I use blobs. And I created this kind of graphic which lists what I have found and what you have found, the kind of fundamentals of healing. And I know that sounds very sort of, knit your own underwear and meditate. I don't knit my own underwear, but I do meditate. But these things work. They don't work in the early days, to be honest with you, because who the hell wants to meditate or go for a walk when you've just lost the person you love? These are things that obviously they're brilliant in the early days if you can get yourself to do it, but many of us can't. So once you're able to, if you can try and do these things in tiny, tiny little incremental bursts, they are other things that will ultimately get you through. When you're ill, and I mean a cold, flu, COVID, whatever you may have, I don't mean, very serious illness, that's an entirely different topic. You're not able to do these things. You're not able to exercise. You're not able to source the correct nutrition. You're unlikely to be sleeping well, drinking, all these sort of things that you really do need to get better. And without somebody there to kind of help you and make you a cup of tea or make sure you've got some nutritious food to eat, it becomes even harder to get through the healing process. And that in turn can lead to sort of a mental fog and low mood. And this all can come off the back of a physical illness. So it's something to consider if you do get, a horrible dose of COVID or a flu or a cold, is that you are going to probably feel quite crappy mentally as well as physically. And it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and honestly, you raise a good point there, because it's something that my therapist brought up quite a lot is, if you're feeling griefy, just sit with it. Just accept that you feel a bit griefy. Today, give yourself an hour to just sit and mope. And then generally once you've given yourself permission to do that, you also give yourself a kick up the ass. Say, right, come on, let's get up and get something done. But, just remember, it's okay to feel how you feel. There's no rules to this.
And nobody expects you, even however many years you are into it, nobody expects you to plaster on a smile and be okay all the time. Sometimes we have to go to work, we have to do the school run, we have to do things that do require us to basically put on a bit of a mask. But around the people that love you, and even if necessary on your own, you need to let these feelings out because they sit inside of you and they fester, don't they?
Yeah, and sometimes it's helpful to tell other people that not so much how you're feeling, because you don't want to go anything, but just like somebody, I don't want to talk about it. Or today I do want to talk about it. And that's how like the people supporting the widows can help. But rather than directly asking, do you want to talk about it today? I don't know, maybe arrange some sort of code word or sign with your friends and family. Which will, as they come into the house to see you, like, today I don't want to talk about it, so we'll talk about EastEnders.
Yeah, and that's really interesting actually, because sometimes you just don't want to talk about it. You do just want to, you want to hear the gossip from school, what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't want to
And
talk about the sad.
yeah, you want to remember what normal feels like.
Yeah. And that's actually really important, isn't it? Is to feel, in inverted commas, normal, because that is the very last thing we feel. And another really, really interesting point, the idea that, especially when people kind of venture back into the world, be that work or be that going socialising, having people around to their homes, however you kind of re-enter the world after grief, some days it's all you want to talk about, and you just want to hear their name, and you want to talk about, the way they walked or they smiled, or you want to talk about how much pain you're in. But there are other days where maybe you have to do something, you have a project you have to work on and you need to focus. And if somebody mentions your late person or dead person, you are going to spiral and that thing won't get done. And I have been asked to speak at a conference about grief and returning to work after grief and how they can better facilitate. I'd be very interested in hearing from any listeners that have got any suggestions, things that perhaps really did help them, and also perhaps anything that made it difficult, anything that made their return to work much more challenging, because what we're trying to do here is create a better world for the bereaved, particularly the widowed. And if we can do this by educating one workplace to begin with, that may spread. So any ideas, any suggestions that you've got, please do let us know. Anyway, I think that's probably enough COVID chat. There is an entire episode dedicated to COVID. So we will move on to another, I suppose, slightly controversial topic. It is the subject of new relationships and dating and how you manage that. In-laws is a particularly sensitive one. And in the week, we had a really lovely message from Emma Bellamy, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago. And she talked about a slightly embarrassing situation that occurred when she had her new partner around. So we're going to play this now and let you listen to Emma's voice.
I don't know if I told you, when I started dating Kev, I hadn't told his family because obviously you don't know if it's going to be a thing or not. And I wanted to make sure that we were something before I told his family. I told my mum and dad and my friends and that. So it's quite early in. We're only about 8 or 9 weeks in. And Jamie's dad, who would go weeks, months not hearing from him, suddenly rang me one morning and I was in the shower because getting ready for work. So I thought, I'll ring him back later. Then he texted me and put, "I've left your Christmas presents at the back door." And my heart sank because Kev's van was on my drive. And I was like, he's going to know that I've got a man in my house and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. But equally, who rocks up at someone's house at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning unannounced? So, yeah, it sort of forced my hand into telling them. And as you know the story, his mum no longer speaks to me. And I did say to her, "How long do you want me to sit with a black veil over my head for?" But hey-ho, we're all different.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, yes. I can actually remember you used to park on my drive when we first started dating, and my neighbours used to give me a funny old look in the mornings, but it is what it is.
I remember being out on my brother-in-law's birthday party, and Sarah's mum looking over my shoulder and seeing a picture of you and Tabby and going, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Oh, no." Yeah, well, that's especially brought forward because we were, we just met and we were just friends and we were just sort of building this friendship. And it felt like a bit of an intrusion, and I didn't want it to get lost in the weeds, so to speak. So I basically grasped an owl, took him out for dinner, and just said, "Look, I am chatting with someone, and we're getting along."
I forgot about that meal allowed.
Yeah, that all went really, really, really well. But on the 1 minute I'm messaging you and you send me a picture of you and Tabs, and the next thing I've got my mother-in-law looking over my shoulder going, "Who's that?" And I'm like,
but also,
"Oh no."
Wasn't she in the back of your car once? And I'd been in a magazine, I was fundraising, and she was reading this magazine and just going, "Oh, look, John, there's another widow."
Isn't this your yeah? No, I think isn't this your friend? No, oh, yes. Oh,
And just think, for the record, myself and Sarah's mum get on very well now. It's all very, as anybody that has listened previously will be aware, we're kind of one big disjointed, dysfunctional patchwork family. So it has all worked out really well for us. Not always the case, as we're aware, and we'd love to hear from anybody that has got any more clangers or hilarious stories that you can tell us. Do drop us a voice note, or you can message us, and we can even do it anonymously if you would prefer. So on that note, on Monday, you are going to be listening to another wonderful episode. This is Emily, and she's coming to us all the way from America, and she brings yet another unique perspective on grief. She speaks eloquently. She's a very articulate, very bright woman. And as always, there's a lot of love. So we will be back with you on Monday. And for now, please do take care of yourselves, everybody.
Goodbye.
Lots of love. Thank you for listening today. We'll be back with you soon for more from the front line of loss.
But for now, as you were.